It's been a while since I've scratched my Gordon Ryan itch, so in this video we're going to dive into his match with Roberto Jimenez. Now when studying a match, it tends to be more difficult to focus on a given topic, because 1 minute you're talking about high step passing and the next you're talking about the mount, as opposed to hyper-focusing on a position like the back and studying a lot of different examples on how to trap the arm. Or watching an instructional or YouTube video that tends to be relatively focused on a given position. And you can follow along as they're discussing a given idea or technique, and see different examples of what they're talking about being done in competition. So I think just by the nature of studying a match, this video is going to jump around a lot and be a bit less focused. But there are strategic insights that are gained from studying a specific match, and I think you'll find it to be very helpful.
So for me, the whole thing was to keep him in a supine position on his back and do my guard passing from there.
In my previous video, I talked about how non-chest-to-chest versions of the sumigaeshi tend to lead to front headlock or single leg situations.
About how we could get to the front head out of a failed sumigaeshi or a butterfly sweep.
Now this match between Roberto Jimenez and Gordon Ryan starts out with a non-chest-to-chest version of the sumigaeshi that leads to this A1 position. Now there are quite a few instructionals where this position is discussed, so you can dive deeper into those if you'd like. But in regards to attacking the legs, A1 and A2 are great ways to control your opponent's movement, pin their hips, and take your pick of various leg lock attacks. And we can see this example of Owen using a Kani Basami to enter Cross Ashi from A1. And this is exactly what Gordon Ryan is able to do as well. Now once he enters into Cross Ashi, Gordon's going to transfer to a Shoelace Sankaku as the defender lifts their butt, and as Roberto is propped up on his hand taking his own butt off the ground. You can see Gordon's toes start to peek through as he transfers to the Shoelace Sankaku, which is what Gary Tonin discusses in his instructional, and we can see more examples of this happening. But unfortunately this one from Dominic is not on YouTube and it's only on Flow Grappling. But you can see he starts out in a foot-to-foot configuration, and as he initiates the roll, his opponent's butt comes off the mat, which is a great opportunity to upgrade your foot configuration to the Shoelace Sankaku. So at the beginning of the match, Gordon finds himself in a very good position to attack the legs. And at the time, Roberto is known for his lack of leg lock defense.
One hole in Roberto's game is his leg lock defense.
But in tournaments where heel hooks are illegal, Gordon has used Cross Ashi to sweep. And at the time, Gordon is trying to sell his new instructional on attacking from mount. So he wants to finish with an armbar. But the easiest way to get on top was through the legs.
I entered into Cross Ashi, which I knew was pretty easy to enter into his legs. And then I was like, well, I already posted I was going to do an armbar, so I may as well just use it for a sweep and then come on top.
After he takes top position, Gordon starts to work his high step passing to threaten the J point. And years later, Nikki teaches the same footwork.
I'm going to look to bring my right knee towards my chest. And now from here, I'm going to look to hit a front pummel.
Now remember, this was a few years ago, and it looks like Gordon's still working out the kinks because he face plants. And Roberto tries to capitalize with an arm drag. And slightly later in the match, Roberto tries a second arm drag from this weave position. And if you want to learn more about applying this specific technique, you can do so here. But strategically, Gordon likes to start his matches slow and feel out his opponent. And in this case, it looked like the arm drag was a big part of Roberto's strategy.
You see he attempts a few arm drag. That's what he's going to be doing from here. He's going to be trying to drag up from bottom.
And after he gets a read on him, Gordon starts to pick up the pace and goes side to side with his loose passing, resulting in a low knee shield half guard with an over back grip. And Roberto has the underhook on this far side. So as the top player, Gordon's goal is going to be to put that far shoulder on the mat. And Roberto can make this difficult by building up to an elbow prop, but this opens up space for a near side underhook. And I've talked about it a lot recently, so I don't really want to dive deep into it now. But you can see Gordon's feet are uncrossed as opposed to crossed, giving Gordon a really good ability to drive into Roberto, put that shoulder on the mat, and flatten him out. And from here, with just a crossface, Gordon uses the classic dilemma of threatening the guard pass towards 3/4 mount to get the underhook. But this is where things start to get a bit interesting, because if we look at the near arm of Roberto, it's around Gordon's back, which means if Gordon were to lift his hips, Roberto is going to have no connection to him. And it's going to be difficult for Roberto to off-balance Gordon as he pummels in his butterfly hook, uses a cross knee cut to complete the guard pass to side control. And again, as he completes the guard pass, Gordon takes this posture here, taking Roberto's head off the mat and putting his foot out as a strong base of support, which makes it extremely difficult for Roberto Roberto to bridge and off-balance Gordon to recover his guard. And after he solidifies the guard pass, Gordon quickly starts to drive his knee across towards mount. But this time you can see Roberto's near hand is on Gordon's hip. And if the bottom player uses their hand to post on the hip, now they can transmit the force of their bridge into the top player through their hand. And with that hand on the hip, the bottom player now has a greater ability to off-balance the top player and start to recover their guard. So to deal with this hand on the hip, Gordon recommends that you switch your head to the near side so you can remove the trail hand from the hip before proceeding to mount. So just as he teaches, this is what Gordon does. And he starts to bring his head towards the near side. But Roberto does a very good job of making this difficult. But although he prevents Gordon's head from getting to the near side, he does so by taking his hand off the hip. So now Gordon doesn't need to switch his head because he's won the battle on the near side. But even if we win the battle on the near side, if we go to mount and allow our opponent to get their elbow inside of our knee on the far side, they're most likely going to recover their guard. So if we just have a crossface, what we can do is use this shin mount to help separate the bottom player's knee-elbow connection as we make sure our knee gets inside of their elbow, giving us the freedom to proceed into a stable mount position. Now, if you want to dive deeper into this, a great place to start would be the training resources. And you can play this game to help develop the skill of getting arms into a state of extension. But in the case of Roberto, Gordon already has the underhook on the far side. So after he wins the battle on the near side, the far side battle is relatively easy for Gordon to win, where he transitions to S-mount and attacks the armbar. But Roberto does a really good job of building up to his outside elbow so he can free his inside shoulder. And he's able to escape the armbar attempt using the reverse hitchhiker escape that Nikki breaks down in this YouTube video here. But then we find ourselves back in the A1 position. And this time Roberto tries to counter with a wedging backtake. And the determining factor of whether or not this will work is beating the inside knee. And the best way to do so is by pushing on that knee with your hand.
If I roll and push with my hand, I'll probably land out here. I don't have his hips with my hands, they're too far away.
But if we don't push the knee and we focus on controlling the hip, now it can be difficult for us to beat the knee.
I roll through, I try to grab the far hip, he keeps his knee down in between us.
So often the best grip to take is going to be a compromise between the two.
If I just push the knee, that's probably the easiest way to clear the knee, but I don't have the hips. If I reach for the far hip, best way to control the hip, but I don't clear the knee. Whereas instead of going behind the hips, I reach in front, kind of gripping like the front of the thigh, but making sure my arm threads through like this. Okay.
And this is what Roberto tries, but unfortunately he's not able to beat the knee. And Gordon ends up back on his legs. But you gotta respect Roberto staying in the pocket and going for the back take.
He's trying to get past my legs. He's trying to take my back at one point. So, I mean, you gotta respect that.
And now for the second time, Gordon's able to use a leg entanglement to come up on a sweep. And the gripping pattern he uses on this next sequence is very interesting. On the near leg, he has a grip with his fingers inside. And on the far leg, he has a grip with his thumb inside. Now in my video about north-south guard passing, we talked about how the bottom player is going to want to high leg over and try and put their foot in our armpit. And when they do, we can no longer walk towards north-south. But it can be a great time to take a cross scoop grip and use a duck under guard pass. And Gordon uses this grip on the outside leg to help guide Roberto into that cross scoop grip, and Roberto threads his foot in the armpit, which means it no longer makes sense for Gordon to try and get a second underhook and continue to pass towards north-south. So instead, he goes back towards the legs using a duck under to switch sides and threaten the guard pass. Now Roberto was again able to recover his guard, but at this point, Roberto is so exhausted.
But I think he was just so physically exhausted by the time I put him on bottom the second time after he escaped the first armbar that it was just hard to catch up.
And Gordon's able to dance past the guard relatively quickly and get back to that S mount. Now, when trying to apply an armbar, Greg talks about 3 invariants. The first is you have to stay close and connected to your partner's shoulder. The second is to hold your partner down towards the mat. And the third is to separate the arm we are attacking from everything else. And Gordon applies all 3 of these invariants to get a strong break to end the match.
If I gave him more time to tap, he was gonna slip out. So I was just like, okay, he's got to get broken now.
So hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you thought it was a bit scattered, I recommend you check out something like my north-south guard passing video. That's more focused on a specific topic as opposed to diving deep into a given match. And if you're interested in the tool I use to do all my studying, it's called the Outlier Database, and the link is in the description. And when you sign up, be sure to join the Discord, which now has over 1,000 people. And I'll talk to you there.